3 months behind on rent, I had stopped counting the unopened envelopes stacked on the kitchen counter. Each one was another reminder that I was sinking and the waterline was rising fast. I'd trimmed my budget to the bone, no coffee runs, no streaming subscriptions, and dinners that consisted of instant noodles, seasoned with regret. My part-time jobs barely covered utilities, and the landlord's letters grew more pointed by the week. That Tuesday, rain lashed against the windows, and the air inside felt heavier than the storm outside. I was hunched over my laptop, scanning yet another rejection email, when a sharp knock rattled the front door. My heart skipped. Rent day wasn't for another week, but I knew that knock. When I opened the door, Mr. Hales stood there, framed by the gray light. Late 50s, broad-shouldered, with a face that carried both charm and calculation. He'd always been polite in that detached landlord sort of way, until now. Today, his gaze lingered too long, sizing me up as if I were both a problem and an opportunity. "Evening," he said, voice smooth but clipped. "Mind if we talk?" I stepped aside, not out of courtesy, but because blocking him felt pointless. He took in the living room with a slow sweep, pausing on the stack of bills, the second-hand couch, the water stain on the ceiling. His smirk was almost imperceptible. "You're 3 months overdue," he began, though we both knew I didn't need reminding. Ordinarily, I'd start the eviction process. But he let the word dangle, heavy with unspoken meaning. I crossed my arms. But what? His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the sound of rain filled the silence. "But I'm willing to make you an offer. One that clears your debt without a single dollar changing hands." It took me a heartbeat too long to understand. The offer wasn't about fixing the pipes or forgiving the rent out of kindness. It was personal. Deliberately, uncomfortably personal. My stomach tightened. The room felt smaller, the air warmer. He leaned back, almost casual, as if proposing a business deal. "Dinner. Just the two of us. We'll talk arrangements." I wanted to tell him no, to slam the door and let the storm swallow the rest. But then my mind flashed to my younger sister's text from last night. "Don't worry about me. Just don't lose the apartment. Losing this place would scatter us both." "I see," I said, keeping my voice even, hiding the churn inside. "And if I decline?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then I'll have no choice but to follow the lease agreement." I looked past him, at the rain-slick street, the glow of the street lamp bending through the water. Choices, in moments like this, were an illusion. Still, I nodded slowly. "Dinner," I agreed. "But on my terms." He raised an eyebrow, curious. I closed the door behind him, the lock clicking into place. In my mind, the first spark of a plan had already taken root. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, rainwater dripping from the stain overhead in an irregular rhythm. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mr. Hale's smile, smug, certain, predatory. But somewhere in the sleepless dark, certainty shifted. If he thought I was trapped, he'd underestimated me. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and cool. My first step wasn't picking out something to wear for dinner. It was opening my laptop and searching his name. Public records, business listings, property management documents. His name appeared often, but what caught my eye was his wife's. Rebecca Hale. She wasn't a name on the lease, but she was the registered owner of every property he managed. And she was also, according to the local paper's community section, heavily involved in neighborhood committees that hated scandal. I leaned back, tapping my pen against the desk. If there was one thing men like Mr. Hale feared more than losing money, it was losing control of their image. By noon, I'd set up a backup email account, one that didn't trace back to me. I prepped it with a list of contacts, local housing authorities, tenant rights groups, and yes, Rebecca Hale's public committee address. Then I let my laptop screen go black and went to make coffee. The rest of the day passed in slow motion. I cleaned the apartment, not because I cared about appearances, but because I needed the illusion of normalcy. My sister texted me a meme about landlords being the final boss of adulthood. I almost laughed. At 6:45, I left for the restaurant. No makeup, just a steady gaze and a coat deep enough to hide the small audio recorder clipped inside my pocket. I didn't need to see my reflection to know my expression wasn't one he'd expect. The restaurant was upscale but not ostentatious. Dim lighting, polished wood, the low murmur of conversations that wouldn't carry. Mr. Hale was already seated, his chair angled so he could watch the door. His eyes scanned me, searching for gratitude or nervousness. "You're right on time," he said, gesturing for me to sit. The clink of cutlery and the soft hum of jazz filled the gaps between our words. He asked about my situation with a mock sympathy that barely covered his intent. I answered politely, letting my voice dip just enough to make him believe I was playing along. Then, casually, I asked about his wife. "Rebecca's quite the community figure," I said, sipping water. His smile stiffened. The night played out as he hoped. At least, that's what he thought. When he invited me to continue the evening at his place, I agreed, feigning hesitation. Inside his home, I excused myself to freshen up and slipped into his office instead. A quick scan of his desk revealed more than I'd hoped. Tax statements, unlicensed rental agreements, and correspondence he wouldn't want public. My phone camera clicked quietly, sealing the first part of my plan. When I stepped back into the living room, Mr. Hale was pouring 2 drinks. His tie was loosened, his expression smug, as if the outcome of tonight was already decided. "Scotch," he offered, holding out a glass. I took it but didn't drink. Instead, I set it on the coffee table, letting the ice melt in the amber liquid. My pulse was steady. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head all day. "You know," I began, settling into the couch opposite him, "I've been thinking about your offer." His smile widened. And I think you should hear mine." He laughed, short, dismissive. "This isn't a negotiation." I reached into my coat pocket and took out my phone. A single tap, and the room filled with his own voice from our dinner. Low, deliberate, unmistakable. Dinner. Just the 2 of us. "We'll talk arrangements." His smirk faltered. I paused the playback and slid the phone back into my pocket. "That's just the appetizer," I said softly. "The main course is in your office." The flicker of realization in his eyes was brief, but telling. He straightened in his chair. "You've been snooping?" "I've been documenting," I corrected. "Tax fraud, unlicensed rentals, and enough questionable contracts to keep the housing board busy for months. You should really lock your desk drawers." He set his drink down slowly. "You're playing a dangerous game." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "I've been in danger since the day I signed your lease. But here's the difference. You need me quiet more than I need you scared." His jaw tightened, the first real crack in his composure. "What do you want?" "Simple," I said. "Wipe my debt. Extend my lease for 2 years at a fixed, affordable rate. And make sure I'm never harassed about payments again." He shook his head. "You think you can blackmail me?" "I'm not blackmailing you. I'm giving you an alternative to public humiliation, legal charges, and a wife who might find your arrangements interesting." The silence stretched. The clock on the mantel ticked loud enough to fill the space between us. He studied me as if weighing whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. Finally, he exhaled through his nose, a thin ribbon of resignation. "You'll have your answer tomorrow." I stood, pulling my coat around me. "No," I said. "You'll have my terms met within 24 hours. If not, Rebecca gets a very detailed email, copied to the housing authority." His face was blank, but his knuckles were white around his glass. I didn't wait for a reply. At the door, I glanced back just once. "You thought I couldn't refuse your offer," I said. "Turns out I could rewrite it." The door closed behind me, the night air cold and sharp against my skin. My hands were steady. The game had changed, and this time, I was the one holding the board. Morning came without dreams. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold, staring at my phone as if I could will it to buzz. At 9:03 a.m., it did. An email from Hale Property Management. Subject: Lease Agreement Update. Body: Outstanding balance, $0. New lease attached. Rate locked for 24 months. No greeting. No apology. Just the bare facts. Compliance without acknowledgement. I opened the PDF. Everything was in writing. Debt cleared, rent fixed, term guaranteed. My signature was the only thing needed to make it binding. I signed. The next days passed quietly. I went to work, came home, and for the first time in months, the apartment didn't feel like a ticking clock counting down to eviction. My sister dropped by with takeout one evening, joking about finally having a reason to buy curtains. It wasn't until a week later that I heard the rest. Mrs. Lopez from down the hall caught me in the lobby. Did you hear? The property management's changing hands. Something about a family matter. I played dumb, but the pieces fit. Rebecca Hale had likely received the email, read the attached documents, and decided to handle things her own way. Mr. Hale was still technically in charge, but his name no longer appeared on the posted notices in the building. I didn't need to know the details. I'd seen enough to recognize when someone else was pulling strings. One evening, while locking my door, I paused. The hallway was quiet, just the hum of the fluorescent lights. The same space that once felt like a narrow corridor to nowhere now felt secure. Like the walls had shifted slightly in my favor. I thought about the night in his living room. The way he looked so sure he was the one making the rules. And I thought about how easy it would have been to cave, to believe there was no other choice. But survival isn't just about accepting the hand you're dealt. Sometimes it's about picking up the deck, shuffling it, and dealing yourself something better. I didn't ruin him. That wasn't my goal. People like Mr. Hale have ways of landing on their feet. But he knew now that I wasn't a pawn to be moved at will. And so did I. As I turned the deadbolt, the final click felt like punctuation, firm, final, mine. For anyone listening, I'd say this. Sometimes an offer you can't refuse is just another way of saying, I think you're too desperate to fight back. And sometimes, the best answer isn't yes or no. It's rewriting the terms so you walk away on your own feet. The door shut behind me, sealing in the quiet. On the other side, the world kept turning, storms kept brewing. But here, for now,